Hello everybody, this is Yoko Cinema Reactions. Now let's get another recording done. Okay, this is part 2 and it starts with chapter 2. You know, it was only after I went into commerce that I truly had a dream for the future. Risha had once confided in a friend. And up until then, I existed only as the Crown Prince's fiancée or my father's daughter. My every act was to become more worthy of that status, but now, for the first time, I actually have a goal of my own. And that's good. Oh yeah? Her friend said. He was the ruler of the Desert King, Dom, and his smile was awfully charming. What's that? Risha smiled back. I want to travel to every single country in the world. I want to see everything in every town, peruse their markets, and meet the eyes of every person who lives there. By now, that felt like such a distant dream. Risha awoke at the start, eyes snapping open as she sensed a disturbance in the air. She unsheathed her sword halfway, primed for danger. Inside the coach, her old enemy sat across from her, one hand outstretched. What do you think you're doing? She demanded. What was he going to do? Was he going to touch her face? Head? Chest? I don't know. When they'd boarded the coach, Risha had warned him not to lay a single finger on her throughout the trip to his kingdom. Ordering the prince not to touch his consort was absurd, but Arnold readily agreed. He had, after all, promised to follow her every direction. And yet, here he was, already breaking his promise. Arnold appeared unperturbed by her glare. Don't look at me like that. I was merely trying to recover what you took from me. What? What'd she take? His sword? Confused, Risha looked at the sword in her hand. It had a black lacquered scabbard with a simple golden decoration. Engraved on the hilt was the Galkine crest. Did she take it out of his sheath when she woke up? Oh, Risha thrust the sword back at Arnold. My apologies. Arnold chuckled. You caught me off guard. You were nodding off, and then you suddenly snatched up my sword. You look quite content snuggling up with it. Arnold propped the sword beside him. Risha pressed a hand to her chest to quell her racing heart. A sword that gutted me in my previous life is now my bedmate. What a world. Oh, that's funny. Her recent stint as a knight had left her ill at ease without a blade at hand. She just couldn't believe it was Arnold's she'd reached. Girl! If you two are the only ones in the carriage, of course that's going to be the only one you reached for. I didn't mean to disturb you, but I doubted sleeping with a weapon would be comfortable. I'm impressed you sensed my intent before I even touched you. Arnold rested one elbow against the window frame, watching her with shameless fascination. One only develops instincts like that from combat training. And you were also a member of the court. How in the world did you find the time? Oh... Would you believe me if I told you I've had previous lives? And every time I die, I end up back at that frickin' scene? Risha shrugged. She couldn't just say, I pretended to be a man in a previous life. That's how. I assume there's more to you than your devotion to the sword. You seem to like flowers. She followed Arnold's gaze to where she bundled a small bouquet in a handkerchief. This was their 5th day on the road to Galkine. Every day, without fail, she'd picked flowers whenever they stopped to water the horses. The ones from today were still fresh, but the ones she'd begun drying 5 days ago were almost ready. I didn't pick those because they're pretty. Risha brought the blooms to her face, spirits rising at their sweet scent. Spring wildflowers had a soft and gentle smell. Risha looked out the window at the forest spreading toward Galkine, thinking of the rare native flowers going into bloom. She wished she could pick those as well, but that would cause too much delay. She gazed on wistfully. After watching her in silence for some time, Arnold said, By the way, I sent one of my men ahead on a fast horse to deliver your order to the company you requested. They'll be invited to Galkine to discuss the wedding ceremony. Thank you, Risha said. I'm glad you kept your word. The Aria Trading Company, Arnold mused. I've heard of them. They're up-and-comers, aren't they? Have you done business with them before? No, but I heard from a friend that they hold a very high standard of quality. Risha was pleasantly surprised at how easily Arnold had acceded to request. Typically, a royal household had their own personal dealer. Getting them to do business with someone else could be difficult. I want to establish a connection with Arya as soon as possible, Riche thought. It was, of course, the company that had taken her in during her first life. The company had been established just 2 years prior to picking her up by its owner, a man named Tully. They were still in the growth stage, but in just a few years they would be the grandest trading company in all the world. They had proven a great boon in her life as an apothecary as well, helping to distribute her newest medicines. She'd struggled to win their trust initially, but she pledged to work much harder this time around. This marriage isn't going to happen. I need an escape plan for when it all falls apart. I must bring to bear all my knowledge and influence as a crown princess. Riche didn't know Arnold's plans, but she had no intention of sitting around and waiting for him to use her as he pleased. She'd spend her time on as his consort wisely. Everything must serve her ultimate goal, to live longer than 5 years and live well. Her fierce determination must have shown on her face because Arnold gave her a little bemused smile. Yes? God, Riche grimaced at the flawlessly handsome countenance. Such beauty possessed by such a powerful destruction. The fact that he'd been the man to kill her did nothing to lessen her fascination. In fact, it almost made it worse. The study of contrasts. Sorry, She was interrupted by the horse's loud whinnies. Stop! Hey, stop the coach! Shouts drifted back from conveyance ahead of theirs, which contained the luggage and attendants. The squadron of knights tailing the column coaches sped off toward the front. Who do you think you... Ugh! That didn't sound good. Riche moved to climb out, but Arnold was faster. He drew his sword. Hey! Dang it! God dang it. Arnold locked the door from the outside. Stay hidden. Why is he putting himself in danger? That's what knights are for. The fact that Riche had been about to do the same thing didn't occur to her. It's probably bandits. He told me to stay hidden in here, but I'm not so sure about that. Arnold had left her locked in from the outside, hoping to keep her safe, but Riche didn't like her odds. There were 5 coaches, but this one was certainly the grandest. It locked on the inside as well, but that wouldn't stop someone with enough determination. If she did as she was told, she'd just be waiting patiently for a bandit to break a window and drag her out. Keeping one eye on the coachman fleeing into the forest, Riche began a methodical search for something to help her. Right, her hairpin. This sure brings me back. She unfastened it, twisting it into the gap of the door. Back when I was a maid, my lady would lock herself in her chambers all the time to avoid her studies. I had to break her out just like this. The lock on the coach was simple, and it came open easily. Once she was free, she scanned her surroundings. She didn't see anyone who looked immediately hostile, but there was noise up ahead. Cautiously, she headed toward it. Before long, she found Arnold. Wow. Roughly 10 men, the bandits she presumed, lay crumpled on the ground. In their midst stood Arnold, in the process of tripping another man into the dirt. He scowled, blade at the man's throat. Is that it, then? Ugh! Arnold kicked the bandit in the stomach, eyes blazing with cruelty. That's all the thrill you offer me after I went to the trouble of drawing my sword? Barely worth it. I'm bored already. He wasn't angry. On the contrary, he stared his enemies down with chilly disappointment, as if this had all been a letdown. Even Arnold's own knights seemed terrified of their master when he was in a mood. Arnold smoothly flicked the blade off his sword. Wait. Wiping the blade on the bandit's shirt before sheathing it. The rest of the men on the ground seemed to be unconscious. Wait, he didn't kill anyone? Why not? Is it because we haven't reached Galkind? She supposed even Arnold knew better than to go around killing the citizens of other countries. Or perhaps he had yet to become the ruthless monster she knew him as. Well, I mean, it doesn't have to go the same way that it did in your previous life. When you're married to him, you can try and make him a better person, so he doesn't become the monster that you knew. Arnold seemed to sense her gaze, turning around with a start. Genuine emotion bloomed on his face, worlds away from the blank mask he wore to face down the bandits. How did you get out of the coach? Riche shrugged. If I tell you, you'll be able to prevent me from doing it again. Arnold snickered. You continue to amaze me. How can you go from ice cold to suddenly looking like a normal 19-year-old? It's disconcerting. Riche fought down her disquiet as a man alighted from a coach and shouted, Your Highness, not again! It was Oliver, one of the prince's attendants. He had silver hair and was roughly as tall as Arnold. What do you think all these knights are for? Decoration? Why do you insist on endangering yourself? Riche had only met Oliver briefly a few days ago, but he didn't appear to be intimidated by Arnold at all, and, well, he's not wrong. She feared the menace would return to Arnold's expression, but he just looked annoyed. I could tell they were prepared to kill. I'd prefer to take the burden on myself than risk multiple injuries so far afield. And we already have casualties. He was right. Several injured knights leaned listlessly along the tires. Arnold issued orders to those still able-bodied. First squad, see to the wounded. Second squad, arrest those men. Yes, sir. Oliver appeared unsatisfied. Your Highness, that is a weak justification. I'm overjoyed you're well, but you must consider Lady Riche. Perhaps next time we run into a team of murderous brigands, you could allow your consort to remain in the coach? I told her to remain in the coach. You locked her in the coach! She managed to get out, though. Riche quickly averted her gaze, turning her attention to the wounded knights. They didn't appear badly injured, yet they all seemed exhausted. Excuse me, can I take a look? Riche approached the knight, acting as a medic. He looked round, startled by her presence. Nonsense, my lady. Don't trouble yourself. Why he can't listen, I don't know. This was not unreasonable, but the wariness in his eyes made it clear he wanted her nowhere near his comrade. He isn't just being polite, he truly is on guard. Beside them, an injured knight groaned as another helped him up. What's wrong with you? The second knight asked the first. I feel numb. What? Damn. The knight grabbed up one of the fallen knight's bandit swords, growing pale as he inspected the blade. Your Highness, look at this. Poison. Arnold clicked his tongue. Locate every laceration and bind them close to the heart. Suck the poison from the wounds. He mostly got that right, at least. In the meantime, Riche located the nearest bound bandit and pulled his dagger out of its sheath. Its wet coating gleamed in the sunlight just as the knight had said. They applied the poison liberally. Whatever it is, it must be cheap and easily bought in bulk. She wafted the smell toward her, bracing for something rancid, but detected nothing. Then she brought it closer to her nose. It smells sweet, like an overripe apple. Shaygrass and blue cat mushrooms. All the knights appear to have the same symptoms, so I won't have to check every blade. Riche stood back up and headed for the coach. Oliver took a step after her. Your Highness, Lady Riche, leave her. She may do as she pleases. She's well trained, Oliver mused, but a battlefield is no place for a young lady. She probably wasn't prepared for such a dreadful spectacle. Riche ignored the murmurs and focused on her work. There they are. I'll take these, and... The poison must be a sleeping drug. She overheard Arnold say, Hunters use such drugs to weaken larger prey. I doubt this dose is lethal. But it certainly is annoying, replied Oliver. We're still 2 days out from Galkine. Lugging a company of sleeping men in armor won't be pleasant. We'll have to stop somewhere nearby. A hunter settlement. Perhaps they will have an antidote. Excuse me. Riche, who'd returned from the carriage, raised a hand. I have an antidote. What? The entire company stared at her in awe. As it turns out, Arnold's guess was right. This sweet-smelling substance was a hunter's drug, made from ingredients that were only toxic in their raw form. Heat rendered them harmless. Riche had encountered this poison several times before, curing a customer afflicted with it during her life as an apothecary. A lethal dose for a grown man would fill a wine glass. They likely got less than 1/100th of that. Riche explained to Arnold, not looking up from her work. Still, the numbness can block their airways with the roots of their tongue. It's best to lay them on their sides. Yes, I understand the theory and the solution. Arnold gazed down at Riche's hands. The part I'm struggling with is why you're the one telling me this. Well, I know how to make the antidote, Riche said patiently as she muddled the herbs together in the white soup bowl she'd borrowed from her flowers. She crushed them with the back of a spoon before adding another dried flower, crushing that as well, and combining them to form a paste. This process would be easier with the pestle, but she wasn't about to complain. This poison is common. It's cheap and easy to make, which often means the antidote is simple as well. The antidote was synthesized, in fact, when hunters witnessed a deer showing no symptoms after eating a certain mushroom. They tasted those along with other common herbs the deer ate. Riche mentally thanked them for their scientific rigor as she added a bit of water, straining it all through a cloth. Riche stood up, brandishing the bowl of bright green medicine. Boiling would make the antidote more potent, but this works in a pinch. That was when she noticed the astonished stares. Unsure of what social faux pas she'd perpetrated, she looked away. Completely stunned, Arnold looked thoughtful. It was imperative the knights were treated as soon as possible, but to Riche's dismay, no one was moving. Do they not trust me? That makes no sense. Anyone would be reluctant to use medicine concocted by a complete stranger. Or that makes sense. She needed to dispel their doubts. Rolling up her sleeve, Riche approached Arnold and drew his sword from his scabbard. I need to borrow this for a moment, Your Highness. What are you... She pushed the blade against the soft skin of her inner arm. Blood welled up along with a sharp sting of pain. Nothing compared to her injury sustained during her life as a knight, though. Arnold did not share her nonchalantness. What do you think you're doing? He grabbed for her arm. She stepped out of his grasp. Was blood truly so shocking? She didn't have time to worry about it. Clutching the overfull bowl, Riche hurried back to the knights. Don't worry, this isn't poison. She demonstrated as much by drizzling it with a spoon over her own flesh wound. It stung. That meant the ingredients were working. This is crushed liquori grass. Leucua flowers and Carolina nuts. I'll swallow some if that's what it takes to prove it's safe. It was horribly bitter. She hoped it wouldn't come to that. The paralysis will last for days. Please make up your mind quickly. Make up our mind? Will you allow me to cure the poison, or would you rather drag paralyzed soldiers all the way back to Galkine? Galkine, whatever. I suppose you could waste His Highness's time searching for a hunter settlement to use their antidote. She smiled serenely. It makes no difference to us, right, Your Highness? In the end, Riche applied the antidote. The recovery took a few hours. While they waited, Riche picked herbs in the same meadow she'd been gazing at with yearning. From the carriage, a fortuitous turn of events. She found an anti-inflammatory herbs and flowers to ease sour bellies, ingredients for curing headaches, and mushrooms for inducing slumber. She wrapped them all up in a handkerchief. In the meantime, Arnold dispatched a messenger to the region's lord, making arrangements to deliver the apprehended bandits. After coordinating with Oliver, he drifted over to Riche. I see your interest in flowers as mercenary, rather than ornamental, he said, surveying the heaps of herbs gathered on the bank of the pond. He sat down beside her. When he didn't say anything more, Riche went back to work plucking leaves from plants with valuable stems. The leaves had no medicinal effect, but they did make a decent broth. Slumber mushroom spores were a nuisance unless dried. They were spread out beside her in the sun. I wonder, would he be annoyed if I attached herbs to the roof of the coach? That would be unusual adornment for a crown prince's retinue, but it wouldn't hurt to ask. She realized quite suddenly that Arnold was looking at her hand specifically. He sat cross-legged with his chin propped on his fist, staring absently like a kid watching a column of ants march by. What is so fascinating about hands? Or herbs. Herbs. Their eyes met. Am I bothering you? He asked. Riche shook her head slowly. Not at all. I was just curious what caught your eye. Nothing specific. I was just thinking about how very unusual you are. He was smiling again. I'm looking forward to how you'll surprise me next. Like I'm some sort of rare pet he bought to entertain him? She didn't like that. Nothing she'd done was at all remarkable. Actually, kinda is, considering you're a noble lady that shouldn't have access to this sort of knowledge. Or the skills that you got as a knight. So of course he's gonna be curious. Normal task performed by a normal person. I didn't make that antidote for your amusement. I realized that. The instigating smile faded from his lips. You know, those knights you coerced into taking your home-brewed medicine were all born in the slums. Coerced? That's hardly the word I'd use. Galkine claims to value merit above all else, but in the end, people are judged by where they came from. Despite this, these men fought their way up from nothing. Riche paused in plucking the seeds from a flower and looked up at Arnold. The man with the worst cases of the paralysis were all newly assigned. They'd spent weeks training to ensure this mission was a success. That older knight, the one who bowed to you, it sustained an injury protecting the rookies. He cares deeply about his men. You seem to care about them too, Riche commented. I handpicked them for my retinue. Whatever. Arnold clambered to his... Arnold clambered to his feet only to fall into a bow. And you kept them safe. You have my deepest gratitude. Riche found herself at a loss for words. Was this Arnold putting on a mask to hide the monster within? Or was this the real him? She remembered the way he looked when he held his blade to the bandit's throat, like a child poised to break a toy he had grown bored of. That's probably the mask. Don't mention it, Riche said, uncomfortable. I know how to do it, so I did. Arnold laughed softly. Be that as it may, I still count a noble woman who can brew remedies from wildflowers by the side of the road a rare find. Yeah, that's what I've been saying. Earlier when you grabbed my wrist... Riche steered the subject away from her incongruous knowledge. You broke your promise. You said you wouldn't touch me. That was reflex, Arnold protested. I thought you were going to hurt yourself. Oh, she kind of did. Such a simple conversation, so casual. It had Riche feeling positively peculiar. "Why are your knights so wary around me?" she asked. "Wary? Oh, they were all at the palace when you broke your first engagement. They're most likely concerned I'm bringing home a villainous jilt who will lead to my ruin. Something silly like that." "I see. Apparently being dumped by a prince called into question one's herbalist abilities." "I'm glad you mentioned it," Arnold went on, "because there may be people in Galkind who will oppose our union. I will do everything in my power to protect you, but you must bring any insults or threats to me right away." "Are there likely to be many?" "In theory, the crown prince may choose his own wife. But the done thing is, of course, to marry a princess, I assume a duke's daughter would have at least some ties to the royal family." He assumed correctly. She was in the family tree, if a rather distant branch. "My father has ordered me to choose a bride from a different kingdom rather than a woman of my own land because one never knows when a hostage will come in handy," Raishe finished for him. Galkind was an expansionist empire. Currently peace reigned, but peace was precarious. If Galkind demanded any of the countries to hand over a princess bride, then none were in a position to refuse. With his daughter in the hands of a foreign power, no king would dare oppose a war that power cared to wage. I sent a message to my father telling him I happened upon a close relation of Hermity's king, a duke's daughter who had been recently tossed aside by her fiancé," Arnold said. "I also may have implied I was the reason for your falling out. Yours and the prince's. Why, when I saw a woman so powerful and connected and beloved, I couldn't help but plunder you." "Plunder me?" "That's certainly one way to describe it. Dietrich had kicked up an almighty fuss, despite being the one who broke the engagement. My father approves of you because he sees you as a bargaining chip. There will be others who aren't prepared to accept you so willingly." "Really, that's accepting?" "Is that so?" Riche said steadily. "Never fear," Arnold responded. "They'll eat their words, every one of them. They will receive you as their crown princess if they value their... No, being a hostage is perfect." Arnold stared at her. "As a hostage, I'll have no official duties, will I? We can pretend I'm only here under great duress, and there will be no need for my comment on governmental or diplomatic affairs." Arnold hesitated. "I suppose not." "Excellent. Then I can live my dream of being utterly useless." Riche trembled with delight. The thought of acting as an ambassador had really been weighing on her mind. Being a princess was non-stop work. Having been groomed for the position from an early age, Riche knew members of the royal family barely even had time to sleep. But prisoners didn't have places in government. "This is your weight off my mind," Riche admitted. "Thank you so much for keeping your promise, Your Highness." Of course. "But don't worry, I won't shirk my duties as wedding planner." Nearly ready to collapse with relief, Riche returned to her herbs. After the bandit incident, Riche felt the knights began to ease a bit in their presence. Despite their initial reluctance to accept her help, they continued to report the injured men's progress and bring any concerns directly to her. In return, they took over gathering herbs from the surrounding countryside on their rest stops. She hadn't done it for gratitude, but she was nonetheless touched. Gathering medicinal herbs had been second nature ever since her life as an apothecary, and it was foolish to ever turn down loyalty. Several days after the altercation with the bandits, the coach train finally arrived in the imperial capital of Galkind. "Oh my," Riche murmured as they passed through the gates. White stone buildings stood in straight rows, lining clean, orderly streets. The first stories still appeared to be shops, while the second floor windows were festooned with flowers. Everywhere she looked were smiling faces. Citizens turned out to witness their prince's return over the smooth brick roads. Overlooking it all was the towering magnificence of the royal palace. "The capital is a seat of power in Galkind," Arnold explained. "Several key trade routes converge here." Riche nodded, suddenly anxious to be out of the coach. More and more people were gathering to watch their progress, some carrying shopping bags in both arms or holding hands with children. Many of them waved as if greeting someone dear to them. Okay. I think I might have to... end this one. Okay, I think I'm going to end this part off here, guys. I'll see you guys next time.